The metallic tang of blood hit her tongue before she even realized she was bleeding. Her breath came in sharp bursts, every inhale searing her lungs with cold night air. Alexandra Lexi Vaughn, once a champion pentathlete, now just another forgotten athlete nursing old injuries, had been running for what felt like hours. Her body knew this rhythm, the cadence of her steps, the burning in her thighs, the desperate pounding of her heart. What she didn't know was why the forest around her seemed alive, whispering with a hunger that chilled her marrow. The hunt had begun hours earlier, though Lexi hadn't recognized it at first. The old castle ruin sat like a carcass against the moonlit cliffs, its jagged towers clawing at the sky. She had wandered too close, chasing a foolish impulse to relive her training days, sprinting across uneven ground, vaulting fallen trees like they were hurdles. She'd thought she was alone. She wasn't. They had come out of the shadows. Pale figures in shredded gowns and soldiers' coats, their movements sharp and wrong, like marionettes jerked by cruel strings. And at their center, the Countess. Her beauty was impossible, suffocating, skin like cracked porcelain, lips the deep red of spoiled wine. When she smiled, her teeth gleamed too sharp, too many. Her eyes locked on Lexi with a hunger older than the ruin itself. "Run," the Countess had whispered, her voice carrying through the night like silk over a blade. "Let me taste your fear." Lexi had obeyed instinct. She had run. Now, branches whipped her face as she tore through the forest, every sound behind her too close, too deliberate. The laughter of the Countess's followers chased her, a chorus of cracked throats and gnashing teeth. They didn't move like people, they crawled, skittered, bounded on all fours with inhuman speed. Lexi's lungs screamed, but she pushed harder. Her mind flickered back to the pentathlon, running, shooting, swimming, fencing, horse riding. Each skill, drilled into her until it was second nature, now felt like her only tether to survival. But this wasn't an Olympic arena. This was something primal, and the prize wasn't a medal, it was the right to live. The forest opened suddenly, spitting her out onto the edge of a black lake. Moonlight rippled across the water, blinding her for a moment. She stopped, chest heaving, scanning for options. Behind her, twigs snapped. Leaves crunched. They were closing in. Her gaze snapped to a small fishing boat tied to a crooked dock. "Hey!" a voice hissed sharply from the shadows near it. A man stepped into the moonlight, messy hair, sea-salted clothes, eyes glinting with both charm and mischief. He looked like someone who smiled too easily in the face of danger. A fisherman, by the looks of him. "If you want to live, get in." Lexi hesitated. Stranger. Unknown. Could be a trap. But the Countess's laughter curled through the trees, closer, closer. She bolted for the boat. The fisherman shoved her down, untying the rope with practiced hands. The boat drifted just as pale shapes broke the tree-line, their claws raking the air. One of them shrieked, the sound tearing through Lexi's skull like glass. "Row," the fisherman barked, tossing her an oar. She rowed. The water slapped violently, the boat creaking under each stroke. The Countess stood on the shore now, watching them drift away, her gown black against the silver night. Her mouth stretched into a grin too wide for her face. "This is only the beginning," she called, her voice carrying across the water. "I will savor the bitter taste of your heart." Lexi's hands trembled on the oar, but she didn't stop. She knew, with a bone-deep certainty, that the Countess wasn't bluffing. The hunt had only just begun. The boat drifted into the fog like a coffin set loose on dark water. Each row Lexi pulled made her shoulders burn, but she refused to stop. The fisherman, sitting across from her, wore a half-smile like this was just another night on the lake, just another catch. His eyes never left the tree-line, though, sharp and cautious. When the forest disappeared behind the veil of mist, Lexi finally let the oar rest. Her chest rose and fell like a bellows, her arms trembling. "You could have left me," she panted, wiping blood from her lip. The fisherman smirked. And miss all the fun? Not a chance. Lexi's eyes narrowed. Who are you? He dipped his head, hair falling into his eyes. Call me Elias. Been fishing these waters since I was old enough to row. And you? Lexi. She hesitated, swallowing the bitter taste of fear still coating her mouth. I used to compete. Pentathlon. Elias raised his brows, impressed. So you can run, fight, shoot, handy. Might be the reason you're still breathing. Lexi didn't answer. She was too busy listening. The silence here wasn't silence at all. Beneath the lap of water came faint whispers, words she couldn't understand, weaving through the mist. Every hair on her arms stood on end. The boat struck the far dock with a dull thud. Elias was up immediately, tying them off with quiet efficiency. He held out a hand to her. She ignored it, hauling herself up. The dock led to a narrow path, muddy and slick. Lexi's shoes squelched as they climbed into town. Or what remained of it. The place looked half abandoned, wooden houses with shutters banging loose, street lamps sputtering with dying light. Not many stick around anymore, Elias muttered, reading her face. Too many vanishings. Too many stories about the Countess. Lexi flinched at the name. You know what she is. Everyone here does, he said grimly. Undead. She's been feeding for centuries. Her followers. Cursed, half dead, half willing. Once she marks you, your prey. Lexi's stomach twisted. She didn't need confirmation. She had seen their faces. The sound of boots interrupted them, heavy, deliberate. From around the corner, a man emerged. His bulk filled the street, shoulders broad beneath a battered police coat. His face looked carved from stone, jaw clenched, eyes shadowed with suspicion. A pistol rested lazily in his hand, but Lexi sensed he could raise it in a blink. What the hell are you two doing out here? His voice was rough, gravel dragged across pavement. Elias spread his hands, grinning like a cat. Evening, Officer Kane. Just out for a row. The cop's gaze flicked to Lexi, sharp as a blade. And her? Chased, Lexi said flatly. By things that shouldn't exist. Kane's jaw tightened, but his eyes didn't waver. Countess's pets. The air grew colder, as if the name itself summoned her presence. Lexi's breath misted in front of her. She's hunting me, Lexi admitted. Said she wants the bitter taste of my heart. Something flickered in Kane. Eyes, fear buried under layers of stubbornness. He holstered the pistol, but only halfway. You should have stayed gone, he muttered. Anyone marked by her brings trouble to whoever they touch. And I don't have time for trouble. Elias snorted. You never do. Kane ignored him, turning back to Lexi. You want to live? Then you stick close. Because once she starts the hunt, she doesn't stop. Not till she's had her fill. As if on cue, a scream tore through the night, high-pitched, guttural, and close. Lexi's stomach dropped. The Countess's followers had found them. The scream split the night like glass under a hammer. Lexi's blood turned cold as the sound echoed through the hollow streets, carrying with it the stench of something rotten. Elias reacted first, his smirk fading as he grabbed Lexi's arm. They're here. Kane already had his pistol up, eyes sweeping the shadows. His finger rested on the trigger like he was itching to put a bullet in whatever crawled out of the dark. From the far end of the street, a figure staggered into view. At first, it looked human, a woman in a shredded ballgown, her hair knotted with mud, her skin pale as frost. But her jaw hung wrong, dislocated, swinging as if the bones had softened. When she grinned, her teeth were cracked, jagged, black with rot. Don't let it touch you, Kane barked. Lexi's heart hammered as more figures joined her, 6, maybe 7, draped in funeral clothes, military uniforms, scraps of forgotten lives. Their eyes glowed faintly, milky like drowned corpses. They moved fast, jerking forward, their feet scraping stone like claws. The Countess's followers. Lexi stepped back until her shoulders hit the rough wood of a house. She wanted to run, but her body refused. All those years of training screamed inside her, move. Survive. Fight. The first one lunged. Kane's gun cracked, the sound exploding in the night. The bullet punched through the creature's skull, but it kept moving, head jerking sideways as it shrieked with a voice that scraped against her eardrums. Bullets slow them, Kane growled, firing again, but they don't stop. Elias grabbed a broken length of wood from the dock and swung it like a spear, jabbing into a follower's chest. It howled, the force knocking it back but not down. Lexi's instincts kicked in. She scanned the street for a weapon, something, anything. Her eyes caught on a rusted iron rod leaning against a cart. She sprinted, grabbed it, and whirled just in time to block a swipe of clawed fingers. The impact rattled her bones, but adrenaline drowned the pain. With a sharp twist, she drove the rod upward, skewering the thing through its throat. It thrashed, clawing at the rod as a gurgling hiss spilled from its ruined windpipe. Elias laughed, wild and sharp. She fights. I like her. Lexi yanked the rod free, blood, if it was blood, spurting hot against her face. Her stomach lurched at the taste on her lips, bitter, metallic, wrong. The street became chaos. Kane fired round after round, each shot echoing like thunder. Elias fought with the desperation of a man who had nothing left to lose, his makeshift spear cracking bones. And Lexi moved like she was back in competition, blocking, dodging, striking with precision, every muscle remembering what it had once been trained to do. Still, they were outnumbered. For every one they dropped, two more staggered out of the shadows. Their moans grew into a chorus, a hungry chant, surrounding them. And then the air shifted. A cold wind coiled through the street, snuffing the lamps. The followers stopped suddenly, jerking their heads as one. Their pale eyes turned to the far end of the street. The Countess had arrived. She glided forward, her gown dragging like black smoke across the cobblestones. Her beauty was unbearable, terrible in its perfection. She raised her hand, and her followers parted, bowing their broken bodies low. Her smile fixed on Lexi. "You run well, little athlete," the Countess said, her voice echoing as though the buildings themselves carried it. "But you cannot hide. I can already taste you." Lexi's breath caught in her throat. Kane's pistol clicked empty. Elias cursed under his breath. They were trapped. The Countess's presence was suffocating. Even standing at the far end of the street, she seemed to pull the air from Lexi's lungs. Her followers bowed, their spines bending until their bones cracked, whispering her name in voices like insects crawling in her skull. "Run," Elias muttered, his smirk gone. "Now." Kane fired his last bullet directly at the Countess. The shot hit true, dead center in her chest. She staggered as if only surprised, then looked down, amused, fingers brushing the small hole in her gown. When her eyes lifted again, they glowed like coals. Lexi's stomach twisted. Nothing can stop her. The Countess raised her hand, and her followers screamed in unison, a shriek that split the night. They lunged as one. "Move!" Kane roared, shoving Lexi toward a narrow alley. She ran, Elias at her side, Kane covering the rear with the butt of his pistol like a club. The alley reeked of mold and stagnant water. Shadows darted at the edges of her vision, followers clawing at the walls, scraping stone as they skittered after them. Lexi vaulted a toppled barrel, landing light on her feet. Her body remembered obstacles, even when her mind screamed in terror. She grabbed Elias's arm, yanking him over a fence when his foot caught. Behind them, Kane's voice was a steady growl of curses and impact, bone cracking under steel, flesh tearing. He caught up, blood streaking his face, his coat slashed open. They spilled into a wider street, lanterns flickering weakly. The town looked abandoned, but Lexi felt hundreds of eyes watching. Every shutter creak, every gust of wind carried the weight of something lurking. "Where?" she gasped. "My boat won't get us far," Elias panted. "We need ground. High ground." Kane's gaze snapped upward to a church steeple looming at the far end of the street, its cross bent and rusted. There. Strong walls. If it still stands. They sprinted, but the Countess's laughter followed, drifting through the night. It wasn't close, but it was everywhere, inside their bones. Her followers burst from side alleys, slamming into Lexi's path. One swung a clawed hand at her throat. Reflex took over, she ducked, drove her iron rod into its stomach, twisted, and shoved it aside. Another lunged at Elias, catching his sleeve with jagged nails. He snarled, ripping free, his flesh tearing in the process. The wound bled, dark and wet. "Keep going," he barked, limping but still fast. They reached the church steps, breath ragged. Kane threw his shoulder against the heavy wooden door, it groaned but held. "They'll be on us," Lexi cried, spinning to face the street. The followers were closing in, their bodies jerking unnaturally fast. The Countess walked calmly behind them, her smile patient. Inside. Kane roared. He slammed again. The door cracked, then burst open. Elias shoved Lexi through, then followed. Kane slammed it shut and dropped the iron latch. They collapsed in the nave, the air thick with dust and candle wax. The stained glass windows were cracked, the altar long abandoned. For a moment, only their breathing filled the silence. Then the pounding began. Claws and fists hammered the door, wood splintering under the assault. The entire church shook with the force. Lexi leaned back against the stone wall, sweat dripping down her neck. Her body ached, her chest heaved, but she was alive. For now. Elias tore his sleeve open, hissing at the wound on his arm. The flesh was ragged, deep. Lexi's stomach clenched at the sight. Kane knelt, reloading his pistol with shaking hands. His eyes were grim, resigned. This won't hold forever. She'll break through. Lexi's throat tightened. The Countess hadn't needed to catch them tonight. She was playing with them. The hunt was just beginning. And they were already bleeding. The church groaned with every impact, the old timbers straining under the blows of the Countess's followers. Dust drifted from the rafters like falling ash. Lexi pressed her back to the wall, her iron rod slick with blood, her pulse drumming like war. "Won't hold," Kane muttered, his jaw locked tight as he jammed another clip into his pistol. Doors like that weren't built for monsters. Elias sat on the edge of a pew, tying a rag around his bleeding arm. His grin had faded, but his eyes still held a glint of mischief. "Then we pray," he said, nodding at the cracked altar. Lexi's stomach twisted. Pray. To what? God had abandoned this place long ago. The pounding stopped. The silence was worse. For a long breath, the three of them stood still, listening to the echo of their own heartbeats. Lexi dared a glance through a broken stained glass pane. Nothing moved outside, just the empty street, bathed in sickly moonlight. "Did they leave?" she whispered. Kane shook his head. "She's here. She doesn't leave." As if on cue, the air inside the church dropped to freezing. Their breath plumed white, frost crawling across the altar steps. The candles in the corners guttered and died, plunging them into shadows. Then came the voice. "Sanctuary," the Countess's whisper filled the church as though the stone itself carried it. "You think these walls can keep me out?" Lexi's skin prickled. She scanned the nave, her grip tightening on the rod. Elias muttered a curse under his breath, his wounded arm trembling. The stained glass exploded inward with a deafening crash. Shards rained like razors, cutting into flesh. Lexi ducked, a shard slicing across her cheek. Cain fired blindly into the shadows, muzzle flashes lighting twisted faces pressing against the shattered windows. The followers poured in, writhing through the broken glass like spiders through cracks. They scrambled down the walls, their limbs bending wrong, bones popping as they moved. Back! Cain shouted, firing until the clip ran dry. To the altar. They scrambled, vaulting overturned pews as the horde swarmed. Lexi spun, iron rod cracking into a follower's skull, the sound like smashing pottery. Elias swung a broken pew leg, knocking one back into the shadows. The Countess appeared in the center aisle, gliding as if her feet never touched the ground. Her gown rippled in black waves, her smile wide enough to split her face. "You can't hide in his house," she purred. "He doesn't listen here anymore." Her followers shrieked at her words, their frenzy doubling. They swarmed the altar steps, clawing and snapping. Lexi fought like she was back in competition, every strike precise, every dodge instinctive, but her arms were heavy, her breath ragged. Elias was flagging, blood loss painting him pale. Cain fought like a man at war with his own death, pistol empty, swinging it like a hammer. Still, they were losing ground. One follower barreled into Elias, slamming him onto the altar. His weapon clattered away. The creature's teeth snapped inches from his throat. Lexi lunged, driving her rod through its skull, pinning it until it writhed still. Elias shoved it off, coughing blood from his lips. The Countess laughed, the sound melodic and cruel. "Beautiful. You bleed so sweetly." She raised her hand. The followers froze, parting like curtains. From the shadows, something bigger emerged, one of her cursed knights. Armor fused to rotting flesh, its face half bone, half blackened skin. It dragged a rusted blade longer than Lexi's arm. Cain cursed under his breath. "We can't hold this." Lexi's chest heaved, sweat and blood dripping into her eyes. They couldn't outrun this forever. But she knew one thing, if they stayed, they'd be ripped apart. "Then we don't fight to hold," she said, her voice shaking but firm. "We fight to break out." The knight raised its blade, the Countess's grin widened, and the church filled with the sound of cracking stone as their sanctuary turned into a slaughterhouse. The knight's blade crashed down, splintering the altar in a spray of stone and dust. Lexi flung herself sideways, rolling across cracked tiles as the weapon missed her skull by inches. The sound echoed through the church, thunderous, final. "Move!" Cain's voice roared, hoarse but commanding. Elias staggered to his feet, pale as chalk, blood soaking the rag around his arm. He swung a pew leg at a lunging follower, bones snapping under the blow, but his strength was failing. Lexi's instincts screamed. She scanned the chaos, shattered glass, broken wood, clawing hands. Too many. No time. She grabbed Elias by the collar, shoving him toward the side aisle. "We go through the vestry, back exit." Cain fired his last round at the knight's face. The bullet shattered bone but didn't slow it. With a curse, he dropped the gun and picked up a brass candlestick, swinging it like a club. The knight laughed, a wet, hollow sound, its eyes glowing like embers. "Now, damn it!" Cain barked, backing toward them. They tore down the aisle, pews splintering under clawed hands reaching from both sides. Followers shrieked, crawling overwood like insects, teeth snapping at Lexi's shoulders. She jabbed with her iron rod, knocking one back, kicking another in the chest. The vestry door loomed ahead, half-rotted, barred with iron. She threw herself against it. Nothing. Again. It held. "They're on us." Elias gasped, blood dripping from his mouth. Lexi's pulse thundered. Her training had always been about precision, not brute force. But desperation lent her power. She braced, twisted the iron bar until her palms split open. With a scream, the lock gave. The door burst outward. Cold night air swept in. They stumbled into a graveyard. Crooked tombstones leaned in the fog, earth cracked open as though graves themselves had tried to crawl free. "Keep moving," Cain growled, slamming the door shut behind them. A claw punched through the wood instantly, nails scraping his cheek. He shoved a stone slab against the door, but the pounding resumed. It wouldn't hold. Lexi hauled Elias along, her body burning with exhaustion. The mist clung heavy, swallowing the world beyond the graves. Every step felt like wading through molasses, as though the ground itself wanted them buried. The Countess's laughter followed, closer, circling. "You cannot run from the soil," her voice sang. "The ground remembers blood." And then, the ground shifted. Hands broke through the dirt, skeletal fingers clawing upward. Corpses pulled themselves from graves, jawbones snapping, hollow eyes locking on the living. Lexi's breath caught. They were surrounded. Cain swung his candlestick, smashing a skull to pieces. Elias stumbled, nearly falling, Lexi dragging him forward. But the corpses pressed tighter, their teeth gnashing, their hunger endless. "This way!" Lexi shouted, spotting a crumbling mausoleum ahead. Its stone door was half open, darkness yawning inside. Shelter or death, she didn't care. It was their only chance. They sprinted, corpses snapping at their heels. Cain fought like a man possessed, crushing skulls, his face smeared with blood and ash. Lexi shoved Elias through the mausoleum's opening, then dove after him. Cain stumbled in last, slamming the door. The corpses hurled themselves against the stone, their screams shaking the crypt. For a moment, silence. Only their breathing filled the dark. Then Elias collapsed. His body hit the stone floor, blood pooling fast from his torn arm. Lexi fell to her knees beside him. His lips trembled, eyes glassy. "Don't you," she choked, pressing her hands to the wound. "Don't you dare." Elias gave her a faint, crooked grin. "Told you I'd make life interesting." His voice faded, slipping away like smoke. His head lolled back, eyes staring blankly into the crypt's shadows. "No." Lexi's scream tore through the darkness, raw and jagged. Cain stood in a corner, face stone, his silence heavier than grief. Outside, the Countess's voice drifted soft as silk. "One down," she whispered. "Two to go." Lexi's hands trembled, slick with blood. The bitter taste of iron filled her mouth. The hunt wasn't breaking them. It was consuming them. The mausoleum was a tomb in every sense. The air inside pressed down like stone on Lexi's chest. She sat on the cold floor, Elias's blood sticky on her hands, her body trembling. His crooked smile, his last words, burned behind her eyelids. Cain leaned against the wall, battered and silent, his pistol useless, his candlestick bent from too many skulls. The lines on his face looked deeper, carved by grief and exhaustion. Outside, the pounding had stopped. No scraping claws. No snarling. Just silence. Too much silence. "She's waiting," Cain muttered, voice low. "Letting us rot in our own fear." Lexi wanted to argue, to deny it, but she knew he was right. The Countess didn't chase prey like a predator. She herded it, savored it. Elias's death had been deliberate, orchestrated. A piece of meat plucked to weaken the herd. The silence broke with a whisper. "Alexandra." Her name, spoken in a velvet purr, drifted through the cracks in the stone. Lexi's heart jolted. The Countess knew her name. She had never told her. "Your blood sings," the Countess crooned. Sweat. Fear. Regret. Such a bitter taste. The mausoleum shook. Dust rained from the ceiling, bones clattered in the niches. The door, heavy as stone, groaned as if pushed from the outside. Cain raised his bent candlestick, jaw set. If she comes in, we fight. Lexi's grip tightened on the iron rod, her knuckles white. She forced herself to breathe slow, steady, like before a race. Her body was wrecked, her lungs raw, but this was it. The final heat. The stone door cracked wide, splitting the darkness. Moonlight spilled in like a blade. The Countess entered. She didn't crawl or lunge like her followers. She glided, serene, her porcelain face flawless in the pale light. Only her eyes betrayed her, bottomless pits of hunger, glowing faintly red. "You've run well, little athlete," she said, voice echoing in the crypt. "But every race has an end." Her smile stretched wider, impossibly wide. Rows of sharp teeth gleamed like ivory daggers. Lexi screamed and charged. She swung her rod in a perfect arc, her body moving with the precision of every medal she'd ever earned. The rod slammed into the Countess's skull, cracking it like porcelain. The Countess staggered, laughing even as black blood spilled down her cheek. "Oh, delightful." Cain rushed in, ramming the candlestick through her chest. The Countess hissed, her body convulsing. For a heartbeat, Lexi thought it might work, thought she might actually be mortal. But the Countess only leaned forward, lips brushing Cain's ear. "Brave little stone." Then she ripped his throat out with her teeth. Lexi screamed as Cain gurgled, collapsing in a spray of blood. His body twitched once, then stilled. The Countess turned, blood glistening down her chin. Her smile was radiant, demonic. "And now, the taste I've been waiting for." Lexi raised the rod again, but her arms shook. Exhaustion roared through her muscles. She swung, missed, stumbled. The Countess caught her by the throat with one elegant hand, lifting her effortlessly off the ground. Her nails pierced flesh, blood spilling hot down Lexi's neck. She gasped, legs kicking, vision tunneling. The Countess pressed her lips to Lexi's cheek, inhaling deeply. So bitter, so beautiful. Lexi's vision blurred, her heart hammering. She thought of Elias's grin, Cain's stubborn defiance, every race she'd ever run. She tried to fight, but her strength slipped like sand through her fingers. The Countess sank her teeth into her chest. Pain exploded white-hot, then vanished into numbness. The world dimmed, sound collapsing into a hollow hum. The last thing Lexi saw was the Countess's eyes, glowing with ecstasy. The last thing she heard was her own heartbeat, fading into silence. And then, nothing. The Countess stood in the crypt, her gown dripping red, her followers crowding the doorway. She raised her arms, triumphant. "The hunt is finished," she whispered. "And the bitter taste is mine." The forest lay silent after the night's carnage, as if the trees themselves had choked on the memory of what had taken place. Not a bird sang. Not a branch swayed. The dawn painted the horizon in pale shades of pink, but it was a false comfort, the kind of beauty that hides the rot beneath. Alina staggered through the undergrowth, every muscle in her body trembling with exhaustion. Her once precise strides, those of a pentathlete trained to dominate, were now the faltering steps of a survivor barely holding on to life. Her legs were caked in mud and blood, some hers, most not. She could still taste the copper tang of violence on her tongue, bitter as poison. Her eyes darted to the tree lean where the sun clawed its way through. Each shadow stretched long and lean, reminding her of the cursed followers who had chased her with ravenous grins, their hunger echoing in guttural howls. The Countess's face still haunted her vision, frozen in that final moment of grotesque unraveling. Flesh had peeled, bones had cracked, and the scream. God, that scream! It didn't fade with death. It lingered, etched into Alina's marrow, a shriek she would carry forever. Behind her, silence swallowed the clearing where Fisherman Elias and Officer Turner had fallen. She had not buried them, there had been no time, no strength left in her. Their bodies remained among the roots, offerings to the forest that had feasted on so many before them. The alliance had been fragile, bitter at times, but real. Elias's smile, sly and charming even in the face of terror, and Turner's gruff determination, they had carried her through the hunt. And now, she was the only one left. The air thickened as she limped forward, nausea gnawing at her gut. It wasn't just grief. It was the aftertaste, the curse. The Countess had promised it, survive, and the hunger will be yours. At first, Alina thought it had been taunting. But now, her stomach twisted with a craving that no food could satisfy. Her mouth watered at the memory of the Countess's servants, their flesh torn by her desperate hand-to-hand struggle. She remembered the heat of blood splattering her lips, and shame burned through her as she realized she hadn't spit it out. She had swallowed. A sharp pang shot through her chest, forcing her to her knees. Her fingernails clawed at the damp earth, tearing moss and roots as her body convulsed. She gagged, bile rising, but what spilled from her mouth wasn't bile at all, it was thick, blackened ichor, reeking of rot. The curse was in her. No, she rasped, shaking her head, tears streaking her face. No, I beat you. I beat you. Her voice broke against the endless silence of the woods. No answer came, no applause, no vindication. Only the faint rustling of leaves as if something unseen had drawn closer. She could almost hear them, the Countess's words echoing like laughter, every survivor becomes the next predator. Alina stumbled to her feet, wiping the ooze from her chin. She pressed on. Desperate for escape, desperate for salvation. Beyond the trees, she spotted the faint outline of a road. Asphalt. Civilization. The promise of people who might help her, save her, remind her that she was still human. But as she approached, her steps slowed. Her mouth filled again with saliva, sweet and metallic. Her eyes locked on the image of a lone hiker in the distance, oblivious, adjusting his backpack in the morning light. Her heart hammered, not with fear, but with hunger. Alina bit down hard on her tongue, tasting blood. She prayed it would be enough to drown the urge. But deep inside, the hunger purred, settling into her bones, whispering promises of relief with every bite she denied. The hiker turned, spotting her. He waved, calling out a friendly, "Hey. You okay?" Her lips trembled. She wanted to scream run. She wanted to warn him, to beg him to flee before she became what the Countess had left behind. But when she opened her mouth, the only thing that came out was a low, guttural growl. The bitter taste had claimed her. And as the forest reclaimed its silence, Alina stepped onto the road, her shadow stretching long behind her, an omen of the hunt yet to begin.